if you don't look like.
There. Oh, there we go. Oh, also not at all. How do you do? It's kind.
We hug. We've never met. Can we do a hug?
Yeah, so on film. Okay. All right. But yes, but I thought he was you. I came in and I thought you were
Not that handsome. Shall we start?
Yeah, let's do it.
all right. I want to get free food. What do you think? I think I'm here for the interview. I want Pellegrino.
Where's Gilbert Gottfried?
Where's the peppermint?
Yeah.
Cool in here.
That she's ready to work.
Like Frank Santopadre. Yeah, Bobby. You guys know Bobby. Very sweet.
You went to his house.
Here we go.
Hi, I'm Gilbert Gottfried, and this is Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal podcast with my co-host Frank Santopadre. We're once again recording at Nutmeg with our engineer Frank Verderosa. Frank and I would even before the podcast was on, we would talk on the phone, and it would always fall into old celebrities and obscure movies.
She was listening in on these crazy late night phone calls that Gilbert and I were having where we just talk endlessly about nothingness.
They spent hours on the phone talking about all these old comedians and the people of old Hollywood and all the stuff that they talk about on the podcast.
He'd call me from the road. He'd have to discuss something Raymond Burr did.
I said, you guys should do something with it. It's so impressive, the amount of knowledge that both of them have.
She said, you guys have to do something with this.
I really didn't think anybody else would be interested in this, but I thought that it's a good excuse for Gilbert to be able to talk to his heroes.
And Dara thought, this is absurd, but you guys have to do something with this. It's fun. And that's where the podcast idea came from. And Gilbert was, of course, not sold.
And then Professor Erwin Corey went to his house, and he was over 100 at the time. And we walked out of there, and it was not a good interview.
Is this a bunch of nerds at a lunch table?
And we sat and had a piece of pizza, and Gilbert's like, terrible idea. This is a terrible idea. Frank's like, let's try it again. And we had Dick Cavett come to the house, and we used to record. I figured out how to do it myself, and I'd set up the mics, and it was pretty wild.
Well, the show is about show business history, so we're interested in stories. We're interested in anecdotes. We're interested in great storytellers and eyewitnesses to showbiz history.
I like the stories. I really do love the stories.
It was just this tribute to old Hollywood. We get younger people. I mean, on the podcast, if you're 75, you're one of the teenagers.
I think it speaks to how fondly people remember this stuff and how it connects to something.
If you ask Gilbert right now, how do I listen to a podcast? He will have no idea.
The greatest film school in the country when I was a kid was your living room. Because you turn on the TV and they'd have old movies 24 hours a day.
He loves doing the show. He loves talking to people.
Doesn't run off the rails very much. You'd be surprised.
I mean, watching the two of them, and Frank is like unbelievable. He's so smart, and he keeps Gilbert on track.
He's an Australian border collie who just moves the cows back in here. Let's go. You're leaning too much this way here. Let's get the cows going this way. Let's get the cows over here.
1 or 2 episodes we buried in the yard in a shoebox, and you'll never hear them.
The one that I want to get on the show is Papillon Susu.
I got a phone call from him at 11:30 at night, and he was somewhere on the road. And it's a surprise because he doesn't call me from the road very often. He said, I thought of the perfect booking for our show, for the podcast, and I got excited. I thought that he's getting into it.
Now, Papillon Susu is known because she was in Full Metal Jacket as a Vietnamese hooker.
And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, you know, the one that kept saying,
me so horny.
We gotta book her. And I thought it was a put on. And I said, you want a book? What?
To me, it really is as strong as like Play It Again, Sam, or We're Not in Kansas Anymore.
But anyway, that's Gilbert's idea of an ideal guest on the podcast. A woman who was in a movie 40 years ago for 60 seconds not speaking English.
What is your role in the podcast?
My role, and this is very important, is to make sure that the audio is extremely good quality. When I first got into the show, I started to realize that the audio is really important.
Is he being ironic? Is this like an audio guy joke? I didn't.
You got it's the most important thing is that the audio be usable and just good quality, start to finish, and that's really.
Are you done busting my balls?
This concludes our broadcast. And you'd see this grainy footage of the American flag, and it would go dan 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 dan, and it was so sad and scary. And then when that went off, and it was, it was static. And it was like the most, I wonder how many people kill themselves when that happened. Because I certainly, if I had a rifle,